Dear Mixed Bag, welcome to Aldo's first postcard for 2015. Over Christmas, my girlfriend and I were in Switzerland, staying with our friends Mel and Damien. Mel is from Queensland, Australia, and Damien, well, he's as Swiss as a Toblerone convention. Now, one night, Damien's parents came round for dinner, and we were told to expect them bang on 6 p.m, probably earlier. You see, the Swiss are never ever late, especially Damien's parents. So when they were nowhere to be seen at 6 p.m, Damien was absolutely shocked. He sent them a message at 10 minutes past which read, "We are looking forward to enjoying your company this evening," which struck me as one of two things. Either it was pound for pound the greatest piece of sarcasm I have ever heard in my life, or it was the sweetest, most indirect way a grown man could say, "Mum, Dad, please tell me you haven't died in a car accident." Did I mention that they're only 10 minutes late at this part of the story? And then, finally, they arrived a heart-stopping 15 minutes after 6 p.m. But the question was on everyone's mind. Why were they late? We found out days later that what had actually happened was they didn't want to appear too Swiss in front of the Australian guests, had turned up 15 minutes early, parked around the corner and waited in their car, giggling the whole time at how crazy they must have been driving their son. That night, we drank enough booze to keep a conference of divorce lawyers happy. And just FYI, the collective noun for divorce lawyers is a misery. It's a misery of divorce lawyers. Anyway, later that week, we needed to restock the pantry, so we drove to the supermarket with the empty bottles from that boozy night in the back of the car. Now, I'm going to talk about Swiss rubbish collection systems and recycling for a moment. Stick with me though, because there's a point to be made that concerns you, Australia. Now, Damien, who'd lived in Australia for 10 years before moving back to Switzerland for a spell with his Sheila, explained that in Switzerland, bottles are recycled at supermarkets in these big bins called bottle banks, not a bottle bin left out the front of your house. In fact, the only person that comes to your house to collect your unwanted stuff with any regularity is the rubbish man, although there is a paper guy who comes once a month. Now, you'd think that Australia would be better at recycling given that our recycling guys come to our house for everything. Well, when it comes to glass, for instance, the Swiss have a recycling rate of 95%, and that's more than twice the rate in Australia, at least according to a study I found with Visi. More than twice what we can do from our front door. Now see, I asked Damien about how the Swiss rubbish collection and recycling systems vary to ours. One thing he told me was that the Swiss rubbish man comes twice a week to collect their rubbish bags, and you have to pay money for each bag. In fact, if the Swiss don't put their rubbish out on the curb on a certain day with a certain official bag or a certain official rubbish bag sticker, the rubbish man will give them the Swiss equivalent of Australia's legendary "F*** off," which is, he leaves a message with the household in question explaining why their rubbish hasn't been collected and how they can ensure it's collected thereafter. In the town of Auschwitz, on the outskirts of Basel, which was where we were staying, they use the sticker system. It's 19 Swiss francs for a set of 10, which is about $2.70 Australian per bag. Now, think about the size of your wheelie bin, Australia, and remember, you probably tamp that bugger down every bloody week. Imagine that rubbish in 35-litre bags at $2.70 a pop being collected every week. Multiply that by a year, and two things become clear. One, that's a lot of money for rubbish. Two, it's any wonder they take the bottles into the supermarket for recycling. That much empty space in the rubbish every week would cost a bomb. The Swiss rubbish system must be bankrupting the country. The thing is, keep the picture of the amount of rubbish you go through in your mind. The Swiss don't do as much as us. When you walk into Swiss supermarkets after dropping off your bottles, the products they buy come with much less packaging, and the special deals the supermarkets offer on perishable goods tend to be less focused on quantity and more focused on quality. Swiss customers aren't interested in buying 2 kilos of chicken wings if they get a second one free, because there's a good chance they'll end up throwing it out, and that's going to cost them money on the back end when they have to throw it out. So the deals tend to be on better quality chicken wings or marinated chicken wings. So the Swiss will buy the same amount they purchase every bloody week, but this time they'll enjoy the better flavour. That's the value added. I'm speaking in general terms, of course, but it's to make this point. If you rewind this piece, and I highly recommend that you do, and play it back, you could replace the word rubbish with the word emissions and rubbish sticker with carbon price. And the argument from our current Prime Minister about how carbon pricing was trashing the Australian economy is rubbish, absolute rubbish. And it also makes the point that the current Australian government's direct action plan is rubbish. In the Swiss example, the government would pay individual companies grants to reduce the amount of packaging they use in their products. Which ones? Who knows? Probably campaign donors. Then they'd have to hope that A, consumers actually buy the products of the companies they select, and B, the companies they select don't just make a token effort to reduce their packaging and pocket the rest of the cash. So to Damien's parents, and indeed any Swiss person out there in Australia, don't ever hide your Swissness. It's awesome. Be Swiss openly, even arrogantly. Take your fondue sets to a vegan restaurant. Wear Roger Federer gear to the football and throw a Toblerone convention. I'll be there with bells on. Because your rubbish collection and recycling system kicks ass. Go Swiss. And on a side note, #LibSpill and go Turnbull. Cheers. Aldo.
Please check and see just one more time for me. You better wait a